Good evening. My name is Father Jim McNulty. I'm the pastor here at St. Edith, and I want to welcome everybody here today as we start our Lenten Mission for our families of parishes. I'm very happy that you're here, and I think we're going to have a really entertaining and enlightening evening. So let's start with the prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let us take a moment to put ourselves in God's presence. Become aware of God's gaze of love upon you. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks and praise for this day. We thank you for all the blessings that you shower upon us. Strengthen us during our Lenten journey that we may grow closer to you. Send your spirit of wisdom to be with us, that we may discover how to slow down, simplify our lives, and reconnect with you. Help us to communicate well and understand one another on a deeper level. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. And our social worker here at St. Edith, Patty Kelly, arranged our speaker for the mission, so I want to call her forward to give an introduction.
Thank you, Father Jim, and welcome everyone. Before I introduce Dr. Hogan, just a few housekeeping announcements. We are having a reception after the presentation in the hall, and we'd love for you to join us. We have some nice, delicious treats and refreshments for you. For those of you that have not been to St. Edith, to get to the hall, you just go back out into the gathering area, then through the double doors, and on your left is the hall. For those of you that are looking for the restrooms, those are through those double doors and on your right. Dr. Hogan's book, Cultural Hurricanes, will be for sale in the hall after the presentation while the reception is going on if you're interested in that. And this is the first presentation of our Family of Parishes mission. The next will be on Wednesday, and that will be at St. Colette at 1 p.m., and that one will be geared for seniors. The next will be the next two Monday evenings at 7 p.m. So if you're interested, there's a poster out in the gathering space, and there are also some flyers. We'd love for you to join us for additional presentations. We are very excited to have Dr. Hogan here presenting the mission for our family of parishes this year. As you'll soon find out, he's a very engaging speaker who not only knows the subject matter, but presents it in a way that's engaging and interactive and very practical. You'll leave here today with things you can do tonight so that you can better your skills in this area. You can put these things into practice immediately, and that's part of what we really like about his presentations. Dr. Hogan is a Catholic psychologist, a certified relationship therapist, and an author who specializes on the impact of technology and spirituality in relationships. In 2021, he published the book, The Gift of Cultural Hurricanes, Tools to Rebuild Authentic Spirituality, and previously co-authored How to Find the Help You Need, which is a guide to psychotherapy and spiritual direction. He holds a part-time faculty position at Sacred Heart Major Seminary, and he and his wife live in Plymouth and attend Resurrection Catholic Church in Canton. So please help me welcome Dr. Hogan.
Thank you. That was very, is my mic working? Okay, that was very generous, and you don't even know how it's going to be yet. So there are two options for you today. One is that this is going to be helpful and informative, and the second is that it'll be a good Lenten sacrifice. So one of the two, by the time you leave, that's what's going to happen. So just some big picture things. I want to make sure we're all starting on the same page. And the page we're starting on is what I refer to as the cultural hurricane. And you may wonder, what do we mean by a cultural hurricane? And what I'm talking about in the big picture is what changes have happened to us as people, our nervous systems, our relationships, and our connection with God ever since these smartphones came out. These smartphones along with social media. It's remarkable what's happened to us, and we're still figuring it out. So if you ever feel a little like overwhelmed or confused or feel like you should know more, you shouldn't. There's no way we could know more. We're still learning, but that's what we're going to be doing. Now let me go a little further. I kind of think of being a parent and a grandparent or a teacher is as people who are kind of, let me see if this will work. I was saying this is a bucket list. I've always wanted to use one of those red pointers. It doesn't go that far. Oh well. We always want that. What we want to do with our young people and with ourselves is we're on a journey together, and the journey we're on is from where we are to a place where we have this connection with God. Now, I have done a lot of writing in my life. I enjoy writing. I've edited for RCL Benzer, who's a Catholic publisher. I've edited 28 books for them. I have written 2. And so I think learning about God is really important. But if all we have is ideas about God, it really doesn't get us very far. You know, there's a lot of people who know a lot about God, and sometimes they are on TV and get elected to office and they talk about God, but you don't get any sense that they've ever met God. And so what we want with our young people is, and this is what I'm here for. I'm a psychologist. I'm trained in the nervous system. I also went to a seminary, so I have a bit about theology, but we want a nervous system that can connect with God. And as part of our Catholic tradition, we generally say there's 3 ways our nervous system experiences the presence of God. And the first is when we're all alone. And you might think about the way we want to raise our kids so that when they're alone, they know how to pray. You know, they can sit alone and not go crazy and not be bored. Like they can read the Bible and sense what God might be saying to them, right? Like we experience God on our own. But then we have the second thing, which is we believe we experience God in a small group. We call it the domestic church. You know, families are that first place where we meet God. And so we want our young people to find God when they're in a family, right? Like if you have a family, you have those moments, you know, maybe where you're sitting around the table. I know now my kids are all old. My oldest is in her 30s, and that's not old, but, you know, she's a kid, but not really. But, you know, we sit around the table, and maybe we'll pray before a meal. And my wife and I will, after a weekend with the kids, when they all come to town, because they all live everywhere but Michigan, and we say, what was your highlight? And sometimes I'll say, just that moment at the table, to look up and see all these people we love. Or maybe you don't have one of those families with a mom and a dad and kids. Maybe you have a best friend or a partner or like a small group, you know, men's groups. We're made to experience God in these small groups. That's the second thing. And then the third thing, we're meant to experience God as a community, right? When you come to a place like this and we celebrate the Eucharist, you have an encounter with God, and then we become the body of Christ in the world. And that's a really a powerful thing, and I know I've spent my life trying to create materials so young people will be able to do these 3 things. Experience God in their nervous system when they're alone, when they're with close friends or in a small group or a Bible study, and then when they come to Mass and experience God as community. That's the thing. So what's so hard about that, right? That should be easy. Except here's the problem, is we are captains on this boat trying to move our young people and move ourselves into this connection with God. The problem we have is that we are trying to sail through a hurricane right now, aren't we? And this hurricane is no small thing. In fact, if you look at some of the data for what's going on right now, you can see, there we go, that our, you know, I said, those of you who came to Mass here this weekend, our attention span has gone from, on average, humans, since smartphones came out, from 12 seconds down to 8 seconds, which may not seem like a big deal until you realize that goldfish have an attention span of 9 seconds. So we've dropped a full second below goldfish. We also have lost empathy. You know, Sarah Conrath is a researcher right here at the University of Michigan. She's an international expert, and she's saying that our empathy levels are going down, our ability to put ourselves in the shoes of other people. And it turns out empathy is sort of important if we're a Jesus follower, isn't it? Because if we're going to love others as we love ourselves, we have to put ourselves in other people's shoes. So it's a problem. And this, you're going to see why a little bit tonight and a lot next week, why relationally we're getting a little less skilled. Civility's down. And again, if you were at church here this weekend, you heard this. We're going to do a little experiment. If you could just turn to someone you don't know and tell them who you voted for in November. And why, right? Isn't that all right? Like we that ability to talk civilly to each other. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. Like that's a big change, and that is really accelerated because of the technological revolution, and we're going to see that today. You know, we sexually objectify people. You know, the ready access of pornography. We still haven't figured out how to block porn. And I don't know, guys, don't raise your hands. And if you're with your wife. look at me like you don't know what I'm talking about. Like porn? What is porn? Could you explain that to me, Tim? You can just play dumb for this. But can you imagine guys like my age, if we were 15 years old and someone gave you a phone and said 2 clicks and you can look at naked women? Now, I wouldn't, because I've been, devout and pretty, yeah, thank you for laughing. One person got the joke. But I mean, that would be, but today we haven't stopped doing that. In fact, funny thing, I used to teach, does anyone know about the Rainbow Conference that they used to have here for young people? I used to teach that 14 straight years, and I offered a workshop called Sex and Spirituality. And it was always one of those popular workshops. So people said, boy, Tim, you must be good. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You could be like pre-calculus and sexuality, and people would show up for it. So it had sex in it. So, but anyway, when people would come, I would put little index cards on their chairs and ask them to write down any question they had about human sexuality and spirituality, the church, because I didn't know where kids were. And so, and then I would gather them as they came in, and I'd flip through them real quick, and I would adjust the workshop based on where people were at. And, they were so cute back then. They used to ask all kinds, and I'd actually sort them, and then when it was done, I would put them in piles, because I thought I might publish some research someday. I never did, but roughly about 70 to 80% of them asked the question, how far can you go as a Catholic? Like, how far can you go and still be Catholic? And so I would always tell them, you can kiss, but if you get any tongue in there, any French kissing, you become a Hindu. And there would always be that second of looking at me like, is he serious? Is that really the way it works? I'm like, yeah, that's not how it works. Actually, the best part of that whole thing, well, I would show them research that would say, really, the people having the most sex, the best sex, the women climaxing the most, because women don't always climax. That was a little too much information probably for high schoolers. But the people having the best sex are actually married who have a common faith and go to church together, because that develops intimacy that makes sex amazing. And they'd be like, okay. And I'd be like, wait a minute. Are you staying here tonight? Because it's down at the Rent Center. Wait, your parents have the house to themselves? Wow, I wonder what room they're going to end up in tonight. That's wild. And they would just massacre me on the evaluations. Good. I guess it's not good to tell high school kids their parents are at home having sex. Who knew? So what I'm saying is sexual objectification has become much easier thanks to technology. You know that, I know that, but we need to put this together. We've also had this sense of loss of community. For the first time in our country's history, less than 50% of people are part of a church, mosque, or synagogue at the last census. First time. But even worse than that, do you know that bowling leagues have dropped by over 90% since the 70s? People just don't come together. So way to go to be here tonight. This is kind of cool that you're here. Anxiety is the number 1 mental health problem, and we know that kids, teenagers, have an average level of anxiety that's the same as teenagers who were in psychiatric hospitals in the 1950s. All this has happened, and we know it's because of what's happening on these. We know and then deaths of despair, which are overdoses, suicides, and deaths related to alcohol abuse have tripled in most populations in the last 10 years or so, which is why today, our sponsor is Patron Tequila. Life is harsh. Your tequila shouldn't be. All right. Okay, but seriously, I think the idea here is we really do have a challenge on our hands. And on top of all this, spiritually, which we know that now the fastest growing religious group are nuns, N-O-N-E-S. We know that young people are just not finding a home here when they come to church. And a lot of this, as we're going to see, is because of what's happening to their brains. And so how do we address this as church? And this is what we're going to do. Tonight we're going to talk about how we need to slow down and reawaken to God's presence. We may not realize it, but our brains are largely hijacked and addicted to dopamine and noradrenaline right now because of what phones are doing. These are just so cool, aren't they? Like you could it's amazing. Sometimes I wake up, I sit down for my meditation time in the morning, and then I grab my phone because my timer's on it. And then I'm like, ooh, did State win last night? Okay, God, just a minute. I just need to see if Michigan State won because I didn't check. Day 2, we're going to talk about because anxiety is so high. Our resources as Catholics, as Jesus followers, we have so many resources. Anxiety is the one emotion Jesus did not tell us to have. He grieved, he was angry, he loved the full range of emotion, except anxiety. Jesus said, don't be afraid. St. Paul said, here's my advice. Don't worry about anything. Why? Because when our brain is in a state of anxiety, it can't love. love and anxiety are handled by the same central part of the processor, and the two can't do this. You got to pick one. And that's one reason I think why anxiety is such a spiritual issue. And then the last one, we're going to talk about how to heal those relationships. For those of you who might have kids, a little estranged, they voted for the wrong person, whatever, we're going to talk about that, unless you voted for the wrong person, and then in which case I'm going to side with them. Uh-oh. After all that work, and then it came off. All right, so before we go on, I don't want you to think this is anti-technology. I actually love technology. I'll put this on in a second. I actually love technology. And so I think we need to start by just saying how technology really has blessed us, like in the last 15, 20 years. So would you do me a favor and just turn to the people around you and just name one way that you're grateful for technology, one way that you think technology has blessed your family. Go ahead, just for a moment here. On your mark and set, go. All right, if the other person hasn't spoken yet, let them talk. All right, 5 ways technology has blessed your family. Who's got an idea? What's one way? Okay, good. Well, yes. You can FaceTime with kids who are out of town. Awesome, yes. You can stay in touch with people, yes. Emergencies, yes. You can get in touch with people faster. Yeah. You can shop online. Yeah. That's worked out well, hasn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Good. Anything else? Okay, here's what I want you to do. What I'd like you to do is think about how different life is for families today. Because as I look around, I see plenty of parents, and I'm guessing you have kids at home. I also see plenty of grandparents who have kids and grandkids, and so you're going to be the messenger for them after you leave here. So we really want to increase empathy for what's happening in families today. Again, just briefly, I'd like for you to just think about 3 things. First, what screens did you look at when you were growing up? 2, what did you do when it was time to play, when it was time to have fun? And then 3, how is that different today? So would you do me this favor? Just turn to the people, 1 or 2 people around you, and just think, imagine yourself back in that home, like you're in the 8th grade and you come home from school. What's different from then to now? What would you say are some of those big differences? On your mark and set, go. Okay, if you're talking with the introvert, you're the extrovert, go ahead and give that introvert a chance to talk. And by the way, if you're an introvert and you don't want to talk, just keep looking at me right here. Just smile. Don't answer. You don't need to answer them. You don't need to talk here tonight. I don't want to alienate introverts. All right, go ahead. Just another minute for whoever hasn't had a chance to share. Go ahead. But let's go ahead and just name a couple things that are different. How is life different for your grandkids and kids today compared with what it was when you were growing up? What's different? And just a sentence or 2. Technology in every way. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, she said play dates have to be organized. Remember when we were little? Like they'd kick you out and, plus our families, we had so many kids. That, you had 7 or 8, so if you lost one or one got abducted, it was like, well, we still got a good 6. Really. True story. We were going on vacation once, and we went up to Hoga, Michigan in our station wagon, not strapped in, and we were driving, and my mom looked over and said, look at that little girl. We're 2 blocks from home. That looks like Sheila Margaret. And then they say, wait, Ed, stop the car. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's Sheila Margaret. Sheila, get in the car. We're going on vacation. But now it's like a play date. Well, let's get out our office Outlook and schedule it and do a background check on the family. Make sure you talk with them. You don't want any predators within 2 blocks. Yeah. What else is different?
Kids did not need it to be entertained.
Yeah.
They found always something to do.
Yes, kids, because they got used to boredom, so they would create. Boredom is the precursor to creativity. and we think we don't want our kids to be bored. We ought to make them bored. We ought to put them in a room with 4 walls and nothing else and a pad of paper for a day and just see what happens. It'll develop creativity, right? Yes, they're used to being entertained and stimulated and structured and yeah. How about one more difference? Sure. Yet families have radically changed, haven't they? Family structure has changed. There's fewer children, fewer 2-parent families. And so that's another very different thing, isn't it? So it's quite different. And then technology. Like technology has made so many changes. So let's talk about how we can engage. We first want to understand how the cultural hurricane is killing our ability to be present with God. Because, being fully present with God, this is the beginning of our prayer life. And then we're going to talk about how it's key to our spiritual life. And then finally, we're going to practice how to be fully present. We're going to do a couple different exercises here so that you'll leave feeling a bit re-energized. So how are we going to do this? I told you I am a psychologist first, a theologian second, and so that's how I teach. I believe our nervous system is fully capable of connecting with God. And I want to tell you how I approach this as a Catholic psychologist. The first thing to understand is how complex your nervous system is. If you took all the neurons in your body and laid them out next to each other, it would go 45 miles from Detroit to Ann Arbor. We have over 7 trillion neurons, and we have the potential connections in us of 10 to the 1 millionth power. What that means is the creative capability in our nervous system is 10 to the 1 million. That's 10 with a million zeros. This is one of the most complicated things on the planet. Now you might say, well, they're supercomputers, but you know what they can't teach supercomputers? Empathy and love. We are capable of things that supercomputers are not because people are very complex. People are very strange. Have you noticed that? Like everyone's normal, and then you get to know them, and you're like, boy, they're weird. Actually, they're no weirder than anyone else. It's just you got to know them. And how many of you are married? Talk about that principle coming true, right? Yeah, I know. Way to go. The husbands here are so well trained. They're looking at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. I think my wife is amazing. You are, honey. You're amazing. Yeah. So let me talk about these. Of course, Catholic spirituality is the ground of all that we do, but there's a thing called interpersonal neurobiology that is a relatively new field that studies the brain and the electronics of the brain and what happens when we connect with one another. And I was learning this in my 30s, and at that time, our second oldest child, her name's Megan, who is kind of wired like me. Like when she was a child, probably should have thought about Ritalin, but didn't. She gets so over-focused on things that she was clumsy. So it was not unusual when she was a toddler throughout the summer, she had multiple accidents. She would climb and fall. We'd be walking and she'd get so entranced with something, she would just fall and just bounce her head off the sidewalk. Like, any of you know a child like that? Like, just really? So by the end of summer, she had scabs everywhere. She had scabs on her nose, hands, elbows. Like Karen and I used to joke, we'd say, the doorbell would ring and I would say, it's protective services. I think they want to talk to you. Because she looked like an abused child. But let me tell you what would happen with her. We'd go for a walk and she'd slip, she'd fall down and smash into this concrete and she'd be bleeding and she'd be screaming, ah, ah, ah. And we'd pick her up and we'd hold her like this. You know how you do this with kids? And we'd say, oh, little pumpkin, it's okay. I know that stings, doesn't it? She'd say, yeah. We'd say, it's okay, little pumpkin, Daddy's here. And we'd do that over and over and over. And then eventually she'd go, and she'd smile, and you'd put her down, and she'd be fine, but we'd have snot and blood all over our clothes, which is kind of a metaphor for parenting, right? The question is, what happened every time that happened? Now, interpersonal neurobiologists study this. They study digital film of people interacting, and what they would say is, when we interacted with Megan, as soon as we created something called resonance, and had attunement with her, meaning she had a certain energy vibration. Once we met that, and we do it naturally, we say, oh, little pumpkin, and she's like, okay, they get me. She then empties her pain into our heart. We take it into our body, and she receives our comfort, which is why she can get down and feel fine, which is why those of you sitting here now who have a child who's going through a rough time, you feel it. If now that I mentioned it, right, you can feel it's in you because we carry each other's pain. We exchange energy and information, and we do that all the time. But here's the cool part. About 6 months later, it was wintertime, and we were in the family room. In 2 rooms over, we had one of those baby doll toys that cried at random times. You know, do you have one of those toys that's supposed to teach kids to be parents? I think actually it was created by a group of religious women who were trying to get vocations and talking women out of being mothers. Because it just would, you'd be sitting there relaxing, and all of a sudden you'd hear this, and you have to pick it up, and you have to do this, and you have to do this, and then it stops crying. If you ever do have one of those, there's a trick. You can just pick it up by the back and shake it, and it stops crying. But my wife told me I couldn't do that. Something about modeling with the kids, I don't know. So anyway, so we heard this thing crying in the other room, this baby that you have to go, and all of a sudden Megan jumped up and ran to the other room, a little toddler. She could barely talk, and we hear her in the other room saying, "It's okay, little pumpkin, Megan is here," using the same tone of voice, the same words, the same energy. So what had happened is we had been exchanging energy and information with her for that whole summer. She internalized us. We call them introjects. She had introjected our love. That's the way life is. It's almost like we become people by being in relationship. Almost like we're made in the image and likeness of a Trinitarian God who only has identity in relationship with the rest of the Trinity. It's very different than the American model of being independent and making something of yourself. None of us made anything of ourselves. Everything we've done, we've learned from someone or been given to. We've been given a break by someone. So that's what we mean by interpersonal neurobiology. That is a very Catholic idea that we help create each other in relationship. The other thing is quantum entanglement. This idea may be the one that gets me thrown out for being a heretic, but you want to see? Okay, good. Sorry, Father Jim. I should have warned you. No, quantum entanglement. So in quantum physics, the basic idea is this, that once you connect 2 quantum particles together, once they are in relationship, when you separate them, they remain related. And so the most recent experiment, which is quite cool, in the Canary Islands, they took 2 quantum particles and bound them, and then they describe it as when one would move clockwise, the other would move counterclockwise. They separated them. They sent one from Tenerife to La Palma, which are Canary Islands. They manipulated the one 89 miles away, and it continued to affect this one. There was no way of knowing. There was no light. There was no radio signal. But the idea is the world is far more connected than we realize. And now here's the heretical part. You ready for the heretical part? When I learned about this, and I've been studying it for 10 years, and finally it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. I think we are that way with each other. We are entangled with each other. And I think when we love one another, we entangle our lives together, which is why as parents and grandparents, your prayers are really powerful because you're entangled with your kids. And as you pray for them, we don't know how it happens. And I don't know, I have seen this work. Have you had that where you pray hard for someone and you actually get data back that says things have changed? Or God will give you a sense, as Father was saying here in his homily, like you'll get a sense you should pray for someone. You'll start praying for them and find out the next day at just that time something was happening. That's not goofy or, oh, what a coincidence. No, that's the way we're wired. We are connected that way. And as we begin to integrate that in our spirituality, I think everything changes in a really good way. And so between the fact that we know we interact with each other, we exchange energy and information with each other, we also exchange energy and information with God. That's what prayer is, right? When we get grounded and we sense God, and God is in us, God is entangled in us, we're made in God's image, and so we'll have these, we call them God moments, or we have these insights. That's just because God is inside moving us back to God. And okay, so that's what this is all based on. If you're wondering what's the basis of all this, that's the science that drives me. And I think that's important because, for many of us, we live in a world, the worldview that we live in it's like a dogmatic, scientific materialism. Like the only things that are real are the things you can touch and measure. And then we come into church and we have to switch and we think, but that's not reality. Reality out there, that it's not a materialistic world. We know it's all connected and we are all connected. So with that in mind, let's talk about how the cultural hurricane has really damaged our ability to slow down and be present for each other and for God. The first iPhone just came out in 2007. Doesn't it seem like they've been around forever? Just 2007, that's not that long. In 2013, we spend 18 minutes a day looking at our phone. In 2024, adults spend 5 hours and 16 minutes looking at their phone. And adolescents, 6 hours and 5 minutes. Look at what a huge change that is. And here's the thing I want you to keep in mind. That is such a radical change because that 5 hours that we are now looking at our phones, maybe texting, we used to spend that 5 hours looking at people, right? We used to like go to, we'd go to Starbucks and we'd look at people. And I still do. I make a point of not bringing, when I go to a coffee shop, I don't bring my phone in or I keep it in my pocket. And then I just look at people and I tell stories about them in my head. Like, oh, there's a couple, she's mad. He doesn't get that she's mad. I think she's going to break up with him. I'm going to watch this closely, and there's a job interview and you're watching the interview. It's like, oh, relax, honey, you'll have the job. He wants to hire you. Can't you see it in his face? But that's probably because I study way too many faces in my work. But so this time that we are spending far less time looking at each other. And we're spending more time looking at our phone, and texting just doesn't do it. And it happens so fast. I love this picture. On the left side, that's 5 megabytes, just over 50 years ago. On the right side, 512 megabytes in my pocket right now. All that just happened. Here's a quote that's old, but I love it. It said, just 20 years ago, Facebook didn't exist. Twitter was a sound. The cloud was in the sky. 4G was a parking place. LinkedIn was a prison. Applications were what you sent to college. And Skype, for most people, was a typo. All that just changed. That fast. So what is this doing to us? Well, the first thing it's doing is it is creating it's affecting our brain in two ways. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter we need. They call it a motivational transmitter. It is what helps us stay focused. And it really is the neurotransmitter that kicks in when we're anticipating seeing something interesting. So if you're grounded and say you're on retreat and you're praying and you're bringing a problem you have to God, and you're sitting, it is dopamine that's going to prepare this nervous system with 10 to the 1 millionth power sensitivity. The dopamine's going to be preparing this thing to hear from God, which is why on retreat so often we do hear from God. Unfortunately, dopamine is also what kicks in when we're scrolling, when we're on Facebook or Instagram and that feeling of I haven't seen what I'm looking for yet, but I'm looking for something, that scrolling feeling. That's dopamine. We're trying to get the dopamine going. Now the problem is then dopamine, we become addicted. So it's like beer, when you're in college and you get there and a half a beer makes you drunk, and by the time you leave college, again, not me, I never drank, I would just be in the chapel praying, but for you, by the time you leave, it takes a six-pack to get drunk. Because of the addiction, you have increased your tolerance, and that's what's happening with dopamine. And so it requires, you don't have to raise your hand for this, but how many of you, I have, watching a movie and getting kind of bored, so you get out your phone, because there's not enough dopamine for that. I'm tired of waiting for this thing to, and then you start getting, does that happen sometimes? That's because you need more dopamine. You ever watch a movie? This is probably me. And you just want to look for the 2 times, like on YouTube. It's like, okay, this is good but boring, so you put it on. No, that's just me. Never mind. Well, thank you. I feel better having confessed that to a whole group of people. All right. And then the other thing is adrenaline. Adrenaline gets triggered when we're in danger. Adrenaline gets us fired up, or when we're going to play a game or something. When you watch the news, you probably know this, don't want to go into too much detail, but there was before, do you remember when we'd watch network news with Tom Brokaw? And the network news, his job was to tell as many people as possible, cover, so he would never get too opinionated, left or right. For the most part, he would just give us the news with a nice pro-American twist, like it wasn't our fault. We needed to invade Iraq. So that was what the news was then, but then cable news came along, and we deregulated the news, and it didn't have to be fair anymore. And then it became just the opposite. So now there's 2 kinds of news program, aren't there? And they're not giving you the news. They're trying to activate adrenaline. They're trying to make you afraid. They're not just telling you what's going wrong. They're telling you the world's going to end if the other side gets to be in charge, aren't they? And so they activate this sense of stress. The other thing that's happening, because we have 24-hour news, we now know about every bad thing that happens. And so there's this thing called the availability heuristic. And what that is the more we hear about something bad, the more we fear it's going to happen to us. And one of the best examples of this is child abductions, that we are Most parents today are more afraid of a child abduction than they were 35, 40 years ago. They're far more afraid of it. But children have never been safer than they are today. Child abductions are very low now. It's still a tragedy and it still happens, but it's very low. But because we hear about every child that's ever abducted in any part of the world, we think our kids are at risk. The other thing is, because of this, and I don't know if you've experienced this, we have unlimited opportunity, don't we? We hear everything that's going on, and so we're always afraid of missing out on stuff. And because of that, when you ask people, how are you? What do they always say? Busy. They feel fine, and then they say, busy, right? We're so busy. There's a great study by The Economist that said people today say they're about twice as busy as they were 20 years ago, but they are not more productive. They're not getting more done. They just feel busy. And we feel busy because we have all this stuff we feel like we need to do. But when we're busy, it's hard for us to tune into God's presence. There's a great study from the Princeton Divinity School that said, where there were these divinity students, and they were studying to be pastors, and they had all prepared a sermon on the Good Samaritan. You know the story of the Good Samaritan. The person's beat up on the side of the road, and the two people walk by, and then the Samaritan. So, and then they said, so we want you to go give this sermon. But then they tricked him, and because they were part of the study, they said, they broke him into 3 groups. And the first group, they said, go ahead, you have plenty of time. The second group, they said, if you leave right now, you'll get there, but don't slow down. And the third group, they said, you're 10 minutes late, hurry up. Now, they planted an actor between where the teachers were and where the auditorium was where they were going to give the sermon. And this actor was acting like they had been beaten up and they were on the side of the road. And needed help. And so, as they went through, most of the people that had enough time, most of these students that were given enough time, they said, you have plenty of time, most of them stopped to see what was wrong. Only 10% of the future pastors who were in a hurry actually stopped to see what was wrong with this person on the side of the road. So just to review, they're about to give a talk on what you should do if you see someone on the side of the road. And only 10% of people who were in a hurry did it. So what does that tell us? When we are in a hurry, the part of our brain that experiences the present moment, that experiences connection with God, is not working. So why is this important? This is one of my favorite poems. I had this since I was in college. I still have it on my wall. And I'll just read it for you. It says, I was regretting the past and fearing the future. Suddenly my Lord was speaking. My name is I Am. He paused. I waited. He continued. When you live in the past, with its mistakes and regrets, it is hard. I am not there. My name is not I was. When you live in the future with its problems and fears, it is hard. I am not there. My name is not I will be. When you live in this moment, it is not hard. I am here. My name is I Am. Now we all know that's true, don't we? We know that. We can't experience God's presence when we're worried about our regrets by the way, if you want my slides, you can email me, and when all 3 nights are done, I'll put all the slides together. I'll be happy to email them to you. This poem is also in my book, and I don't know about you, but I just can't stand it when religion and organized religion mixes with capitalism. It just makes me sick to my stomach. Having said that, my book is for sale. It's $19 on Amazon, only $15 here. So, okay. And the poem is in there, is my point. It was a legit point. The other thing I love about brain science and the spiritual tradition is you read the spiritual masters, and many of them come to this big conclusion. You're not going to find God if you're not present. In fact, if you read what St. Teresa of Avila says, whoever possesses the present moment possesses God. The present moment is enough. And you'll read this over and over. My problem when I was writing the book is I had to cut down the number of quotes I had from the spiritual masters and our tradition. But then the one I love is Dan Siegel, who's one of the premier researchers of this. And he says, if you can get people to live in the present moment, they will be physically more healthy, sharp, mentally sharper, more empathic, compassionate, and interpersonally sensitive, just from slowing down and being in the present moment. So it is just the right thing to make our nervous system connect with God. So how do we do it? The first thing we do is we experience mindfulness. And we do this through breathing. So we'll just do a little exercise here, if that's all right. Do a little test for you. You ready for a little quiz? And again, those of you who don't want to do a little quiz, that you're here because your spouse made you come, and this is somehow penance, Just sit there. You don't have to do this. That's the cool thing. I'm giving you permission. So, those of you who want to do it, you can put your hand on your belly and go ahead and take a deep breath and notice what happens with your belly. You can try it one more time. Nice deep breath. And you might notice what happened with your belly. And you don't need to answer this, but I wonder how many people did your belly push out when you? How many people did it go in? And then how many people were like, no idea. It just seemed to be doing its own thing. No clue. Nice exercise, Tim, but it didn't do anything for me. All right. Well, here's the thing. If you ever watch a child who's relaxed, take a deep breath, you'll notice their belly just pushes way out. Or people who sing. Because in order to make room for air in the bottom lobes of your lungs, you have to push the belly out to get air down there. Now, here's the important thing. There's a thing called the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve connects your brain down to your whole torso. And the vagus nerve is always sending signals back and forth. And one of the main signals it pays attention to is, how are you breathing? Because if you're breathing shallow, it sends a signal up to the vagus nerve and tells your brain something's wrong. And do you ever have that feeling like something's wrong, I just don't know what yet? You know, you wake up in the morning, you're like, something's wrong. I'll figure it out. Yeah, that's just your vagus nerve tricking your brain into thinking something's wrong. But if you can force yourself to breathe deeply, you can tell the vagus nerve to tell your brain, relax, you can be fully present now. So let's do a little practice breathing. For those of you who haven't learned how to breathe yet, it's never too late. This is called the 3-part breath, and the 3 parts, you can watch me and then we'll do it together. The first part, you're going to push out your belly when you take the first half of your breath in. It looks like this. And the second part, then you're going to fill up your chest cavity in all 4 directions. And so it's going to look like this. You got to imagine imagine a balloon pushing side to side and front to back. It's not as easy as you think, because we're so used to taking a deep breath and we puff out our chest, and all that capacity behind us, those lobes, don't get any air, or don't get very little air. So, and then the third part is after you've filled up all the way, you think, I can't take in any more breath, then you try and take in 2 more sips of air. So it sounds like this. And then you hold it for about 5 seconds, and then you very slowly let it out. And you're sitting down, you'll get lightheaded, but it's okay. Very few people pass out and die when they do this. And if it happens, we'll attend to you when we're done, because we only have a little bit of time here. All right, so those of you who want to try it with me. Go ahead, start by breathing into your belly, and then into your chest, all 4 directions. And then hold, if you can do it without laughing. And then slow exhale. Great, so that's always the start, is to breathe. What I'd invite you to do now is either look down or let your eyes close, because the second part of being mindful is to just tune into your senses. I'm going to give you a little exercise here that can really help. So just take a couple minutes. If you can just let your attention go, starting with your hearing, I'm just going to invite you to listen to all the subtle noises in the background. And if you can shift your attention to your skin, notice the temperature of the room. Maybe notice the comfort of your clothing. And then if you can sense the inside of your body, maybe wiggle your toes, and you'll be able to feel those muscles and ligaments down there. And then just sense your body from the inside, moving up your ankles into your legs. And then into your chest and arms. Just sensing your body from the inside up to your face, especially those muscles around your eyes. They get real tired. And then your arms and hands. And then the last thing, if you can notice your sense of space. And even without opening your eyes or looking up, you can sense the space in this room. You can sense where you are in relation to the rest of the room. And then for just a moment, if you can let yourself sense someone to your right. And as you do that, let's just take a moment and pray for God to bless that person. And we do, God, pray that you'd bless this person sitting here to my right, that your kingdom would come for them, that you give them the grace to surrender whatever it is that's hard tonight. to slow down. They would sense your presence tonight. And then without even looking, you can sense the person on your left and give you a chance just to pray for them. You can let my words do it, or use your, quietly pray your own words, that God, you'd bless this person sitting to my left, that your kingdom would come for them, that they would know your peace, that they would know they're loved, that they'd be able to surrender whatever is blocking being close to you. And then finally, just to ask God's blessing for yourself. God, that you'd bless us, that we would know your love tonight, that you'd help us to settle, be grounded in you. People would see our face and sense you. And with that, you can move your body around a little bit and open your eyes. And there's a longer version of that. It's called the Wheel of Awareness exercise. There's actually a great deal of research with it. And when you get to the end, it gives you a chance to pray. It's a beautiful thing. I made my own version of that. It's on something called the Insight Timer. It's free. So you can look that up. And if you search for it, you'll find it. If you can't, email me and I'll send you a link. That's the first thing we can do. By the way, also, if you have kids, sometimes if you try and get kids to take deep breaths, they laugh at you or they giggle or whatever. But with kids, you can get them to sing. So if you're a teacher, you have a group of kids and you have a hard time getting them to settle down, rather than say, settle down, take a deep breath, which is a disaster, you could try something and say, you could just start singing, Old MacDonald had a farm. E-I-E-I-O. And you start singing, and next thing you know, they're taking a deep breath so that they can sing. And that's one reason why singing is so good when we come to church, because when we sing, it helps us, our bodies and our nervous systems to enter the present moment, which is why that's so important. So that's the first thing. Breathe. Be mindful. Be in the present moment. The second thing is to reduce and simplify stimulation. And there's so much to be said here. But, as I've worked with people for a long time, these are the things I think you can do, and you can do them right now. And the first is you can have boundaries for time. If you have children especially, or for yourself, just start making rules. If they come to Grandma and Grandpa's house for dinner, maybe you could talk to your kids so that they can tell your grandkids, hey, you know what, when you come over for dinner, 5 minutes before dinner, we're going to put all our phones in one place. We're not going to have phones at the table. I tell people tell me all the time, or you go to a restaurant, there's a family eating dinner, they're all on their phones. Why not just a rule? When smartphones just came out, my friend who's a techie, his son had a smartphone, and we were at a Notre Dame game. I had paid for 2 tickets to go to a Notre Dame game, and we were there in the stands, and he was texting someone. And I said, who are you texting? And my friend said, that's his business, that you can't ask that question. And I said, oh, yes, I can ask that question, because he's at a game, I paid for his ticket, and if a friend came and he turned away from us to talk to his friend, it would be legitimate for me to say, hey, Sam, who's your friend? Why is it a rule that you can't ask someone who they're texting? And I know, people tell me, no, Tim, you're dead wrong. But I'm telling you, who said? You get to make the rules. You're the old people. Just say, no, it's a rule. Just act very confident. Like, oh, no, it's really socially unacceptable to text someone. You need to tell who you're texting to. And then people will tell me I'm wrong after, and that's okay. But I say create rules around time for how often you can have your phone. Father was saying here, Father Jim was saying, when you're praying, you should probably not have your phone there. And then, boundaries, in the car, in the table, or rules like, if you have kids or you have grandkids, and you have not blocked adult content on their phone, you got to talk to your kids. It's an absolute necessity that teenagers should have adult content blocked. They should also, by the way, not be able to add apps to their phone, because you can block content, but then they'll use an app which doesn't get monitored as well, and then they can still get to inappropriate content. It's a very simple thing to do. I'll be here after if you want. I can show you how on your phone. It's real simple, but I think we need to do this as a minimum. If you're struggling with social media on your phone, many people just move it to their laptop so that they're not tempted. And then they give themselves a certain amount of time. If you have kids and your grandkids are struggling with porn or with inappropriate stuff, get them a dumb phone. You know what dumb phones are? Dumb phones are the way phones used to be. You can't go on websites. You can't get apps on them. All it does is talk and text. That's all you can do. It's not cruel. Protective Services is not going to show up to your house because you gave your kid a dumb phone because he's shown or she's shown she can't monitor herself because it's so stimulating. And then, I don't know about you, I discovered Do Not Disturb just a year or two ago. I have mine on Do Not Disturb all the time. You can set it so that crucial people can get through to you. Like if you're admin or your family or not, you can set it up so that they can. And then apps do work. Covenant Eyes, Cold Turkey. I use Cold Turkey. That goes on your computer. And I just block, like I can't go to the Notre Dame websites. I can't go to ESPN. I can't go to YouTube. During my workday. So every day when I go there, and I still try, and it'll say, blocked by Cold Turkey. And then it gives you some smart aleck little quote about, your choices are making you the person. Is this who you want to be? So yeah, it's good. So it has that Catholic feel. It just has a little swing of shame to just, and so, but meals are especially important.
It's so nice to all be sitting down together. Who can tell me something they did today?
I drew a horsey.
Good for you, Sam.
I started smoking.
I love you too, sweetheart.
I'm selling bongs out of our minivan.
I got a tramp stamp. I'm getting implants. I'm dating your brother.
I'm cooking meth in the basement.
Great idea, kiddo. That's why you're so popular at school.
It's actually a pretty great story. A bunch of sociologists who were so concerned a couple years ago about what smartphones were doing to the cognitive development of our young people. So they came up with this hashtag device-free dinner. What they are saying is one of the best places to learn social skills and to reverse some of these negative problems that are coming with overuse of cell phones, all the anxiety and the distraction, is to get people to have meals together. We'll talk more about this next week or in 2 weeks. And one of the first things you can do is, and one of the best gifts you can give your kids is really create a meal, an eating experience. Maybe have them cook with you and then eat the meal together. Because when you're at a table, you have to learn those social skills, right? If I'm going to tell a story, but I can't go on and on. I need to be succinct. I need to say it in a way that's interesting. Those are all really important social skills. And the table is where we learn a lot of them. And so if you're thinking, what's one thing I can do from tonight other than get a hold, manage your technology better, it might be to be committed to slow meals with people you love so that you can feel their presence. And so the third thing that we want to talk about is to add listening prayer to our life. I spent some time, I was in formation to be in religious life with the Oblates of St. Francis de Sales. So we sat around, we prayed a lot, and we talked a lot about praying. And one of the things they would say is there's kind of one way to think of prayer is there's 3 levels. And the first is, they call it the oratio, which is this oral, spoken prayer. And then the second level, a little deeper, would be meditative prayer, meditatio. And then the last one would be contemplio, like contemplative prayer. But most of us have a pretty good spoken prayer practices, right? Like we'll say a rosary, we'll meditate, sometimes we'll say rosaries, we'll come to Mass, we'll say our prayers. Many of us have prayer books, which is all awesome. One of the things that can be so helpful for ourselves and for the people we love is to have a prayer that involves quiet and listening. Where we kind of clear our nervous system. Remember this complex thing. Remember, like, a little transistor radio can pick up 100 different signals, and that's a real simple electronic device. We have 10 to the 1 millionth power, abilities, creativity. You don't think we can't sense what God is saying if we listen? You don't think God will talk to us if we make space for Him? And so there's a couple ways of doing this. I'm going to walk you through a little experience of it. And then I'll tell you some others. So you ready for a fun little experience? And if not, can I have my phone back? Sorry, I just have to check my messages. It'll just take a minute. I have music for the background. Cool. So what I'd like to, and again, if this doesn't work for you, this is just one way. It's a guided meditation. And St. Ignatius, you've heard of Ignatian prayer and you've heard of the Jesuits. Well, this was one of the ways he encouraged us to pray, to use our imagination, because God will speak to us through our imagination. So I'm going to guide you through a short prayer. It'll be about 6 or 7 minutes. So, if you're completely not into this and you're here with the person who dragged you, you could just kind of sneak your phone out and just check your brackets. And just don't let the people around you be distracted by it, okay? All right. So let's do this. For this, you'll want to sit in a way that's comfortable. If you're slouching, you might want to sit up a little bit so your feet can be flat on the floor. And you just want to tune into your breathing, and you might want to do a little mini version of that breath prayer we were talking about, a little breathing into your belly, and then into your chest a little bit, and pause, and then slowly exhale. And then I'm going to invite you to use your imagination. And here's the scene I'll encourage you to use. You don't need to use this exact one, but if you can imagine that you're going to be walking on a beach. This may be a beach. I suggest you create one that you've never been on, but you might use beaches that you've been on as a guide, kind of one of your favorite places. You're going to be all alone on this beach. And so if you can begin to kind of use your imagination to start thinking about this beach. Imagine what the soft sand is like on your feet as you walk in the soft sand. Maybe cool, clean water. Cleanest water you've ever experienced washing up over your feet. Maybe warm sun on your skin. Maybe a little breeze, blue skies, puffy clouds. Let your imagination create this. And as you begin to walk along the edge of the beach, you realize this is a place God is helping you to create in your inner world so that God can meet you here. So you also have a backpack over your shoulder. And as you walk along the beach and feel that sand under your feet and that cool water coming splashing over and the warm sun on your skin, you look up ahead and you see a person there and maybe a little fire. He's sitting next to a campfire. And as you get close, you realize this is Jesus. And as you get closer, you see Jesus standing up and he looks at you and he's got this big smile on his face. He's so happy to see you. And in that moment, we can pause and hold that in your mind as we pray for us in this room, God, that your Spirit would be active in us, that you'd enlighten our minds to help us experience you, your love for us, that we would be open to it. We pray that anything that would get in the way would be removed so that we could encounter you. Thank you, Jesus, for this time. As you get close, you see how grateful he is and happy he is to see you. So he even gives you a nice hug. And then he points to your backpack. And you notice that in your backpack are the burdens you're carrying tonight. Just allowing your imagination to play with this. Imagine reaching in to your backpack and taking out the heaviest burden that you're carrying right now. The thing that most keeps you from feeling good. Notice how heavy it is. Notice how your body carries this. Notice the feel that it has. And then with that, maybe you can look up at Jesus and notice that he's looking at you and he gets this whole burden. He gets it even better than you. And you can see that in his face, this great empathy. And with that, he invites you to share this burden with him. He wants to carry it with you. And then one more time, he invites you to go into your backpack and take out one more burden that you're carrying today. It might be big, it might be little, just something that gets in the way of feeling peaceful during the day, of feeling good. So you reach inside and take it out. You may not even know exactly what it is. It might just be this thing that you carry with you, this feeling. Feel the weight of it. Notice how it gets in the way of being fully alive and joyful. And whatever it is or whoever it is, you might imagine then looking up at Jesus and seeing that he looks at you and he gets this. He gets the person, he gets the situation, he knows, and he invites you to share it with him. And so you do. And with that, he invites you to walk towards the water. And as you get to the edge of the water, he invites you to go for a swim. And so imagine just going into that clean water. It's almost magnetized. It's pulling stress out of your body as you effortlessly float and swim through it. Just leaving behind some of those worries and stressors, and then you find yourself climbing back on shore, and he's walking with you, and he does want to take a moment to pray about the things that are important to you. And so with that, you have a chance to share with him anything else that's a burden, maybe things you're feeling bad about, maybe things that you didn't do that you wanted to do, or things you've done that were just wrong. Just take a moment in the quiet of your heart right now to acknowledge that. And notice how he welcomes taking that from you. And then finally he says, I have a couple things I want to give you before you go back. And the first thing he says is, I want to give you my peace. I want you to have my peace deep in your heart. Because the peace I have for you, the world can't give you, and the world can't take it away. And so with that, he gives you a hug, and as he hugs you, you can feel his heart giving your heart that peace, even in the midst of whatever you're going through. And then as he takes a step back, he says, finally, I have a gift for you. And he reaches into his robe and he takes out a gift. And he gives it to you and he says, you're going to need this. And just take a moment and sense what that is that Jesus wants to give you tonight. And if it doesn't make sense, you can imagine holding it up to the light and seeing if that. And with that, you take one last chance to look Jesus in the eye. Feel that incredible love for you, that love that loves you no matter what's going on. That love that is so much bigger than any mistakes any of us have made. It's a love that loves us right now as we are. Anything less than that is a lie. It's nothing but pure love that he has for you. And so grateful you took this time to hang out with him. And with that, he gives you a hug and you begin to move from that space back into the room here. And by that I mean you can let your attention move from your inner imagination, from your inner world, to coming back to being here. And it helps to maybe move around a little bit and then notice the feel of where you're sitting. Again, how your clothing feels, how comfortable you feel. And then you can open your eyes and begin to look around. And then as you slowly reorient to the room, I just want to share a couple other things about ways of praying that are that help you to listen, that help us to listen. There's a common prayer that many of you, I'm sure, know, many of you may use. It's called the Examen. Again, it's a prayer from St. Ignatius. It's one of my favorite all-time prayers. It is simply you pray back over the last 24 hours. You start by giving thanks and you kind of walk through the day. And St. Ignatius says you got to pray and ask God to show you the last 24 hours so that you're seeing the day through God's eyes. And you start by asking God to show you the little gifts of the day, the little moments. Not if there's big things, great, but the little things like the way the sun came up or the taste of coffee or, just the smile of a stranger as you walk down the street or finding out that state won their basketball game or, the little things that just brought you some joy, the people in your life. And then you look for the big feelings in the day and you ask God, remind me, what were the big feelings of the last 24 hours? And then once you find something, sometimes I find it real helpful to be like, wow, that was a big feeling I had in that conversation, like with my wife. Like, tell me, God, what are you up to in me in that moment? What are you wanting to do through me? What was that all about? And just listen. And it blows me away how when we ask God, God is not afraid to talk to us, especially when we acknowledge we don't know how to do this. So that's the Examen. And you can look up, if you just Google the examine, you'll get the first hit will be the Center for Ignatian Prayer, and it's a wonderful description of it. You can also, if you go in the back, it's... No. I do have a brief description, but look, honestly, go online. It's not worth trying to find it in my book. Just go online and find the examine. The other one is Lectio Divina, and there's a lot of traditions that they call it Lectio for short, which is just divine reading, just listening to God speak. It's one thing to do a Bible study where you're studying the Bible, and that's awesome, to say what was going on then, what was Jesus really saying, how does that relate to other things he said. That's an important way to read the Bible. But something my wife and I have been doing lately, which is really cool. She's a spiritual director, so this is what she does for fun. I'm like, what do you want to do, hon? You want to get some drinks and play ping pong? And she's like, maybe we could do Lectio. Just kidding, she's not that way. But we do, and it takes like 12 minutes. So we'll sit, this is the way we do it, and there's no magic, you can do it however you want. Just take some time to quiet. We'll set a timer for 3 minutes and meditate for 3 minutes. Once the timer goes, we'll read usually Sunday's gospel passage. And then we'll sit. If something strikes us, like an image or an idea, we'll just say it real brief. And then we'll sit in quiet. Then we'll read it a second time and see what strikes us. And the real cool thing about doing Lectio with someone else is God will be awakening. Sometimes there'll be a word or an image that awakens in the other person. And then when you read it then, you'll hear that. And sometimes you'll hear stuff that God is trying to say to you. And we have had some really like small miracle type readings. In fact, one time a couple weeks ago, we did this. It was on a Saturday afternoon. We did a little Lectio, and then we met some friends for dinner that night. And when we met, one of the two was really going through their own faith crisis. They haven't been to church in years, and they were bringing up questions, and it was exactly what we had been talking about from our little Lectio. It was really, you would say, that's mind-blowing, that's amazing. And I can just hear Jesus saying, this is what I want for you. I want this every day for you. I want you to listen to me every day. You'll be amazed. And just think of it this way, if it's not attractive, it will give you the upper hand with people. It'll give you what you need, because you'll know stuff about people before you even get into it. That wasn't nice to say it that way. Sorry, Lord. But all right, let's bring this to a close, and then we're going to talk about how we might use this practically, because we've gone through a lot of ideas. If you do want more resources, there is an app called the Insight Timer. There's also an app called Hallow that many of you have. It has lots of great resources. That's a Catholic app. The Insight Timer, I get a lot of activity on that because there's all kinds of Buddhists and Hindus that publish on there, and I publish Christian stuff. So, a lot of Christians are happy to discover that there's Jesus-focused meditations on it. And I have 3 or 4 meditations on Insight Timer. The one we just did was called the Guided Prayer Meditation. And then there's one called Releasing Resentment, which if you're having a hard time forgiving someone, I use brain science research on how do you help people to soften their heart. And then I combine it with their Catholic spirituality, and it's really fun. And I've had some cool feedback from that, from people who've really experienced some life change, which is fun. Which is part of the cool thing about technology. I get these emails from people from around the world saying, that was so great. And I'm like, that was good. How cool. I just did it because it was fun. I was actually going out to be with my godson, who's a wonderful guy. He lived out in Seattle, and he had a recording studio, and he's not doing much religious stuff. So I had this sneaky little manipulative thing I thought I'd do, which is ask him to record my guided meditations. And then he had to edit them, so we had to listen to them 20 times each. Isn't that good? I know. It's no fun being around a psychologist. You never know what we're up to. So here's what we said today. What we said, just to zoom back out, and then we're going to talk about where we want to go with this, and then we'll continue the conversation. I hope you come back for a little snack after, and we talk. But what we said was, these things have radically changed our nervous systems and our relationships and our spirituality. People have likened what these have done to us to, and the reason I call it a cultural hurricane, because it's a 500-year cultural hurricane. The last one came 500 years ago with the printing press. Remember that? Following the printing press, it changed the way we communicated. The printing press illiteracy went from about 30%. Within 10 years, twice as many people could read. And then they started reading their own Bible. And then we had the Reformation. And then we had the scientific revolution. And then we had modernity, where people realized that you can think logically, that the Bible's not the only place where you can discover truth. You can actually use science and modern thought to come to conclusions, which really was hard on the church, and which is why we kind of fought it for a long time, until we realized that actually God is in all of it. And so the same thing is happening now. People have this brand new access to information, right? It used to be so good when as parents you could really control and manipulate your children by withholding information that if they had it, they would use it to do things contrary to what you wanted. That's a joke. You're like, either he's a sociopath or he's trying to be funny. I don't know. You can ask my wife. She'll give you an honest opinion. So the point is that life is changing so radically, and it's changing the way we connect with ourselves and with each other and with God and with our wider community. And so the first step for us and for our kids and grandkids, the first step is to slow down and find God's presence. And then when people come around us, to find ways to help them slow down and find God's presence. So we said it's essential because our brain, when we're rattled and we're rushed and we're distracted, we can't, our nerve, even we may have 10 to the 1 million power of connections, but we're not going to sense God when we're all rushed and rattled and distracted and addicted to dopamine. So how do we do it? We start with mindfulness. We can do this all day with breathing. If you find yourself getting overwhelmed or stressed at work or with your kids, to slow down and do that 3-part breath. And then especially the last part when you're like, and then we look at you like, what are you doing? And it'll distract them and it'll give you the upper hand. And then you can slowly exhale and it'll clear your mind. And then to reduce and simplify, to find a way to reduce all the things that distract you on this. We have to take charge. The way Apple works is when you get a phone, do you have apps on it? Yeah, you have all of them. There's like pages of apps because they want to bombard you with information. You can take them all off. You can just delete all of them and only have what you need. And then even delete some of those. So we have to reduce, and we have to do that for our kids. And then we have to, I think, we can learn to listen in prayer throughout the day to make sure we have dedicated times where we're letting our nervous system settle so we can feel grounded and tune in to God's presence. So the question is, what do you do with all this? I don't want you to leave with a to-do list. I want you to think about maybe one thing I said tonight that might... Oh, sorry. My alarm went off. I take medicine all day long. It's a whole long story. Thank God for this phone. What would I do without it? So the question is, what are you going to do? One, I'd like you to talk about one small change. Here's one thing that I created a book study for this with materials, questions, little video introductions. So if you want to get a group of people together, you can just play the little video introduction and summary of the chapter and then discuss the questions. And what I really like about this book study, it's one of my favorite, it's like a book club where you don't have to read the book. You don't have to read the book. There's enough there just to talk. People don't need to read the book, but it'll give you a chance to keep the conversation going. And it's free. So I want to make sure you know about that resource. And I have these flyers in the back. So if you want to hit the QR code and you can download the whole thing. Or find it and put it on your computer and print it off or whatever. But I'm wondering what's one small change that you're thinking you might want to make. We said here's the 3 categories. I'll put them back up here. The 3 categories are maybe to just breathe a little differently, be more mindful, slow down your brain, decrease stimulation, find a way to listen a little more in prayer. Why don't we just take a minute, about a minute of quiet, and just sense, what do you sense might be the nudge inside of you to do next? And then I'm going to invite you, if you feel like it, to share it with one person. And then if you have questions or you want to share any of that with the group, we can do that. Okay, so let's just take about just under a minute of silence. You might want to tune into your breathing. Say, Lord, that was a lot. Is there something you'd have us do? Just a small next right thing that we might want to do. And then if you'd be comfortable, if you don't want to share, if you're good, that was it, you're done. Check, Lenten sacrifice for the week. I don't need to give up sweets tomorrow because this was definitely a trade-off. You can just keep looking at me like we have this connection. But if you want to share with someone else, either a question that you'd like to have answered, something that feels unfinished, or what you think you might want to do, what you think you're going to do, one small thing you think you might do. If you'd be willing to do that, let's just take a minute. You can turn to each other and just share a little bit, and then we'll talk a little more as a group, and then we'll move it to the social hall. So on your mark and set, go. Go ahead and share if you're up for it. Yeah. Oh, it is. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. Let me get my app going then for her to sell books. Yeah, but it didn't. See, why did it do that? It's probably my phone. Okay. Take about just under a minute more, and then we'll talk. And we're going to start with any little things that you think you're going to do next. Now, maybe that someone around you shared something that's very embarrassing with you, and that would probably embarrass them and be awkward. We should start with those, if you could. Who's willing to share something, a small thing you might want to do, you might want to start doing? This will help the people who haven't thought of something. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. So to mindfulness, and basketball is a great chance. Watching basketball, yes, it's yeah, they close their eyes and they're mindfulness. That's good. There you go. It's a good step. Yes. Yeah. Oh man, and how countercultural. You're saying to let there be silence and give God a chance to talk, because God rarely talks with a 2x4 or screaming. God is almost always a quiet, silent whisper. And I'd like to remind you, that's how our nervous system is wired. It's wired that way. It's a physical reality that we can't sense that more subtle stuff when we're addicted. So yeah, more silence. I love it. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes. Way to go. So he's saying, use your phone, put a timer on there, and when it goes off, have it be a reminder to, and there are apps, and I don't know the name of them, I'll have them for next week if you want to know, but there's apps that randomly go off and ask you a question like that. What are you thinking about? Can you take a deep breath? They're cues to be mindful throughout the day. Yes. I use the timer on Insight Timer for my morning prayer. I put Do Not Disturb on so no one can call, and that has little bells, and I have to have intermittent bells, so I'll do like 22 minutes, but then every 3 minutes I'll get a little gong because it's a reminder. A lot of times I'll be sitting there like, oh Jesus, I'm right here. And then like I've rehearsed what I'm going to say to my sister who voted for the wrong person, and I'm like deep into the fight, and then it's like gong. I'm like, oh, sorry Jesus, I'm back. Because my mind is crazy. Have you heard Ed Lamott? She said, my mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone. And that's one reason why we do resist meditating, because that happens. But what a great idea, little reminders. How about a couple more things you're going to do, and then we'll see if there's questions. Yes, sir. Yes.
Challenge. The first time I took a basket and collected the cell phones, there was gnashing of teeth.
Yes, you took their precious. Yes, but you're saying really fight for those quiet meals, meaning no phones. Exactly. Device-free meals. Yes.
Well, at least Sunday, maybe.
Yes.
Meal, no phones.
Yes.
That works maybe Monday or Tuesday, but start
Yeah. Well, even just the first 10 minutes, like start small, kind of like, okay, we know you're drinking 20 drinks a day. Let's just try 18 tomorrow and see how that works. It's like, we're just going to do 2 minutes or just put them away and have a quiet prayer time. We're going to talk about this in 2 weeks, but like to have a little time of gratitude before the family meal with no phones and just 15 seconds of silence and then gratitude. It'll change the brain. Yeah. We took our kids on vacation when the oldest was like a senior in high school, and we went up to the UP, and we didn't realize it, but they didn't have cell coverage. It was the best vacation ever. It was so nice. We're like, we don't have cell coverage. And my wife and I are in the front seat going like, whoa, we got it right this time. How about one more thing that people are going to do, a small thing you might do differently? Nothing that hasn't been mentioned? Yeah?
definitely reduce the amount of the news you're talking about.
Yeah.
The bad blood that seems to be in the air.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah, so to reduce that bad blood. For what it's worth, I heard this from some researcher who talked about how our brains are getting poisoned by the news. There's a great book about it, by the way, but that's probably too much. I can tell you after if you want to know the name of it. But it's the book's called Untrustworthy. It's a great study of what's happened. But what I do, I get a liberal and a conservative news feed. I pay for them. I subscribe to 2 different feeds, and every morning I get the liberal take on what's happening in the world, and I get the conservative take on it. And I usually agree with both a little bit, and I don't hate anybody. Every now and then I hate someone, but usually I don't hate anybody. And then I do not turn on the TV. I do not watch it, because every time I do, there's a study that said you can tell people who watch 10 minutes of the news in the morning by what their mood is like at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Because when you prime your brain, and we'll learn about priming next week, when you prime your brain with fear and threat and negativity, it stays with you the whole day. So, okay, any last minute, any questions just when then we're going to break? We're going to, anything that people wanted to hear more about or wasn't clear from what we just did, what we talked about tonight? Yes? You can. Yes. It doesn't help what? Yes, that the phone keeps track of all that. There's that app I mentioned called Bark, B-A-R-K. Worth looking it up. That's really one of the most sneaky, coolest things, because it will actually send parents copies of what's the kids looking at online and stuff, so you can know everything, and you don't need to tell them that you know everything. But I think where did we get that rule that kids should have privacy on their phones? I mean, it was easy for us because this was, 12, 14 years ago, but we told our kids, if you want privacy, have a conversation, talk on the phone. We won't eavesdrop. We won't try and listen in. But anything you put on your phone is not private, because people can spy on your phone, and we are spying on your phone. I used to use a very expensive program that took screenshots of everything they were doing. And we would go through it, and we told them that, like, we're going to, because who said it's private? Like, that was just something the media told us, but it's not. Who made that rule? We don't need to buy that. So, good. Any other questions or before we stop for today? Okay, so next Monday we are going to be at Our Lady of Victory, and we're going to talk about how to take this hijacked brain. We're going to do exercises. I'm going to give you things that honestly are some of the most powerful things you can do to get your nervous system back, to live a life of gratitude and peace. There's good science, and it's completely grounded in Catholic spirituality. And then 2 weeks, we'll be at St. Kenneth, and we'll talk about relationships and how to use all this with relationships. Now, every week is freestanding, so if people didn't come tonight, they can come next week, and they'll get it all. They don't need to have been here this week, but it will be all new, so good. Can we stop there? All right, thank you. We're going to pray. We're going to have a closing prayer.
I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I want to remind you that we do have hospitality in the hall. It's right through the double doors in the back of the church. And I want to remind you that Dr. Hogan's book is for sale in the hall. Let's end with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Loving God, we give you thanks and praise for this day, for bringing us together tonight as a family of parishes. Help us to continue to slow down, simplify our lives, and reconnect with you. Protect us, Lord, as we stay awake. Watch over us as we sleep, that awake we may keep watch with Christ, and asleep rest in his peace. We ask this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
See you next Monday.
Okay.